In this video, I'm going to explain image behaviors. So what I mean by that is there's scroller controller, change texture, and atlas changer behaviors. We're going to cover all three. So let's just demonstrate the three behaviors and then I'll explain how they're set up. So this object here is what's called Televator. You can find it in the experimental objects. It was provided by Old Flack, so thank you, Old Flack. It's actually a really great model. I'm just going to open these doors, and you can see it's kind of like an elevator. Let me just close these. I didn't set up a button, so I have to, there we go. Okay, so we're in the elevator. And I just want to point out the way this model is set up, there's sort of a cage around me. And through that cage, you can see a wall, right? That's the object that's going to scroll in this case. So when I click this button to activate the elevator, we can see that the wall seems to be moving downward, which gives the appearance of me moving upward. So you know, the elevator's going up. There's a little shutter there at the end as we get close to the end of it. And then we end up somewhere else. So I'll explain how that works in a moment. We also have this scene here comes from the Cyberpunk Streets DLC. It was actually already set up like this, so I just went with it. It got some really great examples of both the change texture behavior. So all of these images that you see that have this effect of movement is the change texture behavior. So down the road there, you can see the traffic lights that are going to move from red to green. It should move. There you go. So that's the atlas changer behavior, and we'll walk through all of those. But all of the settings for these three behaviors are very similar. So I thought, well, let's just bundle them and take a look at them all at once. All right. So we'll start with the televator. So remember, this is scroller controller, and the televator is really just an example of how it can be used. It's not the only way it can be used. But let's just take a look. So this model, the way it's set up, you have the outside block, and then inside of it, if you just click inside of here, there's another object. Here, I'll kind of pull it out so you can see it. All right, it's stuck inside there, and that's what has the scroll control behavior attached to it. And the first thing that we do is we attach the image file of what it is that's going to scroll. So I had a hard time wrapping my head around, like, what image do I put there? Basically, the way to think of it is it's the thing that we would be looking at that's has the appearance of movement, right? So in this case, we're inside the elevator, we're moving up, so the wall has the appearance of moving down, right, relative to us moving up. If we were in a car, for example, we'd be looking out the window. Maybe the scene around us is moving to the right or to the left, right? If we're in a train, maybe it's the tunnel that's moving. You get the idea. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's not, you know, that you're traveling at all. Maybe it's a sign on the side of the road that's, you know, electrified and has kind of a scrolling image effect. Whatever it is. So the emissive strength just has to do with, you know, if the image has an emissive, that's how bright that emissive is going to be shown. It's kind of irrelevant in this case because this image doesn't have an emissive to it. Later, when we look at the atlas changer, that's a good example of where it has an emissive and it kind of glows as if it's a light. We have the scroll amounts, U and V. The best way I can explain this, think of it like movement in 3D space is X, Y, and Z. For an image, this is similar to that, only U stands for horizontal, so left or right, and V stands for vertical, up or down. In this example, I put 0.003 in the V, which is vertical, and then I scrolled it negative. So in other words, it's scrolling down because I'm moving up. You can also do both if you wanted it to be like moving up and to the left, something like that. It really just depends. It's very flexible. The the start time, running time, and start time, these 3 times represent the total length of the scroll effect. So you have a little bit of time that's it gets started, and then it has the run time, and then has an equal stopping time. Dial this in. I mean, as clearly these are not like seconds or even milliseconds, because I think that elevator lasted what, like 7, 8 seconds. You can go back and look, but point is that it's not one for one milliseconds or seconds. It's a little more complicated than that. So just dial it in, see what feels right to you. I tried a couple of different settings and this felt the best for me. So play around with that. The teleportation option, you can see that it's on right now, and we did end up in a different location. I'm going to circle back to that because a little more to it than just turning it on or off. We'll circle back to that in a moment. We have this shutter effect. This is kind of like a screen shake, and it's pretty subtle. If you go back and look at the video, you might have noticed it shook a little bit when we started up the elevator, and it shook a little bit at the end. You don't have to have that. You can choose to turn it off. You can have it just at the start, just at the end, whatever you like. Always on would be if you weren't triggering it by something. In our case, we triggered it with a button that started the effect. But if you just wanted it to run all the time, you could just turn on to yes, and that would be running all the time. Like, so a sign, for example, might just run continuously. And then the diagnostics checkbox, if you turn that on and you test the level, you'll see some white text in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And that is going to give you some information about the texture in real time if you need it. So if you're trying to dial it in and just see what's going on under the hood, check that box and have a look. So the teleportation is in the developer settings. Incidentally, if you don't have this section turned on, go here in the edit and then go to settings, click on the developer tab, and just make sure yours looks like mine, and you should see that section appear if it's not already there. In this developer section under if used, I've put the words top floor. So just to explain, when we say if used, well, another way of saying that is if activated, right? So we activated this with a button, and so it was used in that sense, and we're designating where do we want to go. We want to go to the top floor. So if we just travel on over here to where we ended up, inside here you can see that I have a zone inside the elevator, and I've called it top floor. So it is finding where that object is and teleporting me to that object. Obviously, if I wanted to go back down, I'd go to whatever it is that other elevator has in there. I think I have it set to bottom floor. It doesn't really matter what you call it. What matters is that you designate where you want to end up. Just use a zone and point to that, and you'll end up wherever that zone is. Next, we have change texture. So we saw these images here all had sort of this movement to it. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to click on this one, for example, and we'll close the developer section, go back to behaviors. So here's change texture. This image is one image. It looks like a whole lot of images, but it's really just one image. This is what's called an atlas. So think of it like an image that's been broken down into a grid. So we have 4 rows, 4 columns, right? So that's what's in image 1. We're not using image 2 right now in this scenario. There's basically, think of it this way, there's 2 different ways to use this behavior. I'm going to walk through the way this one's set up and think of that as type A. I'm going to walk through the same behavior in a different example, and that's going to be sort of type B, and you'll see the difference. So for now, no images in image 2. Texture scale U and V, we already discussed what U and V means. It just means that we're scaling it 100% across the object, and that makes it fit. We don't need an offset in this case because when we do that, it fits on the image just fine. It doesn't, it's not off to the left or anything like that, so it works out well. Scroll direction U and V. Again, the way this is set up using an atlas doesn't really apply. You don't really need it to scroll because the way it is moving is it's starting here in the top left corner of this grid, and at this speed, which is 75, it's going from cell to cell to cell, one after the other. And when it gets down to the bottom, it jumps back up and repeats. That's the movement that it's really getting. So it doesn't really scroll exactly. It just bounces from one cell to the next in the atlas, right? Now, there's another way you can use this behavior. I have it set up over here. There we go. So you can see that I've changed the image to these two images that I just found in there, right? So when we start the game, the first image we'll see is the Grand Canyon Adventure. And notice that I have done a little bit of a texture offset here because the U-Win wasn't showing up centered, so I wanted that to kind of look nicer. I have done a scroll effect here, but I've got no speed and also no atlas because it's not an atlas, it's one image. So there's no rows, no columns, set all that up. All right, so let's put my player right here. You can see that I've logic linked it to this this zone. So when I walk into the zone, it'll start with one image and it'll change to the next. Okay, so we see that the image is static now. It's not moving, it's just one image. And if we walk into that trigger zone, then it switches to the other image. So that's another way you can use change texture. Just trigger the behavior to change. It could scroll, it could do a lot of different things, but in this case, it just went from image 1 to image 2. And lastly, we have the Atlas changer. So let me just click on one of these, Atlas changer. So let me just walk through the settings for this. We have this is one image again, just kind of broke up into 4 spots. So it's called green light color. So it is an atlas, right? 2 columns, 2 rows. It has a display time of 7 seconds. So it's going to stay green for 7 seconds, and then it'll switch to the next color, which is yellow to red, which only has the 2 slots there. So this, and it'll stay yellow for 2 seconds, and then it'll move to the third image, which is another 2x2 atlas. And the display time is 7 seconds. It stays red for 7 seconds. It just cycles around over and over again. You can see the atlas rows and atlas columns are set up right here. Don't have to use an atlas, just like I demonstrated in the last texture, in the last behavior. You don't have to use an atlas; it'll still run. This is just a good example. Emissive strength does apply in this case because these do have an emissive, and so that it gives the effect of it glowing as if it's a light without having to have a light there. The loop delay just is how long does it take before it starts its process over again. And then always on, of course, the traffic light is always on, so it's just going to cycle over and over forever. The diagnostics is the same. So those are the 3 image behaviors. If you liked the video, please be sure to click the like button down below. If you haven't already done so and you want to see more videos like this, be sure to click the subscribe button. And lastly, if you want a notification when I put out new videos, I always say I don't keep a regular schedule. It's really just whenever I have something to show and I have some time, then I put one together. So if you want a notification, click the bell icon. That's going to help you out with that. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching all the way through. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.